One more question. So I know my vibration based on what's manifesting around me and how I feel.
Yeah. I know my vibration. Those are really good words. I know my vibration, therefore I know my point of attraction. I know where I'm in the universe, and most important, I know where I am in relationship to my inner being.
So it seems to me, until there is a thought where I meet a thought, that I don't truly know where my vibration is because it hasn't been manifested or anything yet.
That's right. That's right. So good on physical experience. Doesn't that make the manifestation seem important?
Yes.
And is the thought a manifestation?
Yes.
Yeah. And can we call all that realization?
Yes.
And can we call realization creation?
Mm-hmm. But I get some weird, sick thoughts sometimes. And I go, my inner being must be in some sick place. So
let's talk about this. So, your inner being is not in a sick place.
We're having fun.
But what you are wanting more definition about is about what the receptive mode is. In other words, when you get into your vehicle, that's where Esther most often thinks of the receiver of her radio stations. The receiver, you can tune it to any broadcast channel, yes? You're in the receptive mode, whether you're listening to one station or another, you've set your receiver into the receptive mode of that. So there's the receptive mode of your inner being, and there is the receptive mode of trouble and torment. And so when something occurs to you, this is why your first statement to us is so important. I can tell by the way I feel and by the way it plays out what my true receptive mode was. So if you're in that high-flying, in tune with pure positive energy mode, and it feels like exhilaration, it feels like passion, it feels like love, it feels like interest, it feels like clarity, it feels like sureness and certainty, it feels so good. And as it unfolds, it feels gooder and gooder and gooder and gooder and gooder. You recognize that, don't you?
Yeah.
And if you're overwhelmed, or if you're defensive, or if you're angry, and you feel inspiration, Esther remembers many years ago, she and Jerry had been wandering around a parking lot. It was maybe the first month that they were together. And they'd been driving around a parking lot at the Sheraton Harbor Island in San Diego, looking for a place to park. And it was late at night. And they really wanted to find a place to park. And there just wasn't one. And they drove. Valet parking was closed. And they drove and they drove. And they had about 20 minutes invested in this. And there was a spot, and Esther was driving, and she went to nose in it, and a car that had already passed it is now backing up to it. And he gets out of his car and bangs on Esther's window and demands that this is his parking place. And Esther really felt like it was hers. She was there first. She was nosed in. She had parked the car, and he wanted her to back out. And he said, "Couldn't you see that I was about to reverse into that place? I had passed it, and I was going to reverse into it." Well, he had passed it a long time ago. So Esther backed out, and he pulled in, and Jerry and Esther went to bed after another 20 minutes of waiting for another parking place. And in the morning, when they got into the car to leave the parking place, Esther drove past where that car was, and it was still sitting there, but all 4 tires were flat. And Jerry looked at Esther and he said, "You didn't." Esther said, "I did." Felt really good, too. He had it coming. In other words, she had actually put herself in her bed before she received that inspiration. Just seemed like the best idea she'd ever had. She knew Jerry wouldn't go along with it, so she got dressed, took a nail file, She didn't puncture the tire. She just used it on the valve. Snuck down, let the air out of all 4 tires. And it felt like a really good idea until she saw Jerry's face. He wasn't proud of her. He was in a different receptive mode. So what we're getting at is, the guy did have it coming. In other words, it was his point of attraction. He'd been very demanding and unreasonable, and he'd bullied his way in, and Esther just wanted to level the playing field a little bit. And we're certainly not encouraging those actions. We're just saying, sometimes you get an inspiration from someplace other than in your state of alignment, and you can tell by the way it feels. Now, as it was happening to Esther, in the momentum of her anger, and in the momentum of the injustice of it, that just seemed like the best idea in the world. When she's in alignment, that doesn't seem like a very good idea. It was almost the last bad thing Esther ever did. But you get the point that we're making, is that impulses that come seem perfectly normal given the momentum that you have going. And you cannot really be a good evaluator of what it means in the big picture unless you're in that high-flying mode. But you can't know how to be in the high-flying mode unless you have some of the other experience. And therefore, nothing that you do is inappropriate in your way to coming into full alignment with who you are. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Helpful?
So far.
So far? So now what?
Do you have more? I'll let you flow.
Well, we think that we're all in a place of understanding this. It's tricky for you because as you hear us reveal Esther's deeds, which side of it were you on? You gasped. You were shocked. 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 And yet, you sort of understood too, didn't you? And you've done something like that too, haven't you? The reason that we're having this conversation is because we're not wanting you to evaluate the rightness or the wrongness of the action. We're wanting you to understand the receptive mode from which it was inspired. And we're wanting you to understand that you cannot regulate, you cannot prosecute, you cannot execute, you do not have control over the receptive mode of others. You do not have control over what they do, and you can't stop the momentum. You can't get into a guarded enough place as an individual or as a society to stop unwanted momentum. But you can have your personal experience, and your personal experience with who you are. You can come into a clearer space. You can move yourself gradually and steadily into the receptive mode where all of your power is. And we want you all to know that in that receptive mode of your source energy, the leverage of energy, this is the energy that creates worlds. You can grovel around and let air out of tires and bicker over parking places and such in your physical world, but that's not who you are. You were born to come into alignment with the fullness of who you are. And when you do, then that's the current that you are riding. And we think that that's what you are so angry about, is that you know that there is that current that you can ride when often you're riding another current. But you can't do anything about momentum that's already in motion. That's really the point of all of this conversation. You can't do anything about momentum that is in motion other than allow it to play itself out. So we have a visual for you. So envision a plane taking off. So it's on the runway and it's gathering speed and it takes off and it gradually gets itself up to 35,000 feet. So you can sort of see this gradual. And now think for a moment about the momentum of that. Think about impetus, think about momentum, think about energy, think about jet fuel, think about whatever you need to think about that momentum. So it's at 35,000 feet. Now, out there under that airplane, envision a rocket and watch it fire and get to 35,000 feet. Which had more momentum? This or that?
Rocket.
It did, didn't it? And how did it accomplish its faster momentum? More deliberation. And there's focus, decision. In other words, it's two different ways of going about achieving maybe a similar thing, which is the 35,000 feet altitude that we're talking about as a goal. So what we're saying to you, it does not matter what your trajectory of momentum has been relative to any subject. You have the ability here and now to become more defined in what you're wanting and more focused upon what you're doing. And you have the ability to get your momentum going in the direction of what you want anytime. But in order to be that rocket with that faster momentum, it is necessary that you engage this energy that creates world. There's a leverage and alignment that just isn't present under any other conditions. And so we're happy to have this conversation with you about the different receptive modes that you might be in. And we're also happy that you understand firsthand what it feels like to be in the receptive mode that is something not who you now are. In other words, you can't connect with source energy in the way so many of you are doing. You cannot connect with source energy in the conscious, deliberate way that so many of you are doing and ever be happy in your indeliberate approach to life experience. You know too much. You can't go back. You cannot be a deliberate creator and then be a sloppy creator and ever give yourself a break about being a sloppy creator. It's just what the expansion and evolution is. And that is as far as we will go in explaining your unhappiness with being in that lower receptive mode. Now we ask you, in light of what our friend was asking earlier, do these explanations about the laws of the universe help you? Does it help you to understand why things are happening for you and others the way that they are? Does this knowledge give you more insight as to what's happening? And do you need your own exposure to life and your own ability to apply what you're learning in order to find out how it really works? The words don't teach, but the life experience does. Are you in agreement with that?
Yes, indeed.
Doesn't it feel to you like we're all making too much of all of this? That you could just get into a happy place? You could just get into a happy place? So why don't you just get into a happy place? Why don't you just cut it out and get into a happy place? We're serious about this question. Why do you not just stop with the and get up here where you belong? Why?
Why, Abraham? Tell me, why?
Well, use your logic. Tell us, what is it about?
Programming.
Programming's a good word. What is programming? Beliefs. What is belief? Thought you keep thinking. What is all of that? Momentum. Momentum.